Welcome, everyone. I'm Catherine Maroney from Community Affairs at New-York-Presbyterian Hudson Valley Hospital. And along with Chef Emily Berner, who is an honorary last today, we are delighted to present a cooking class on traditional foods of Ireland from the Chef Peter X. Kelly Teaching Kitchen here on the hospital's Cortlandt Manor campus. Chef Emily and I are also very delighted to welcome Cedric O'Connor as our special guest presenter. He is Vice President of Human Resources and Volunteer Services, and he will share aspects of his heritage and stories from his trips to Ireland. First, a few ground rules. Everyone, please stay muted throughout the presentation and put any of your comments in chat. We welcome your comments and we'll definitely get to your questions. If you still need the recipes Chef Emily has shared with all registrants, and we're expecting a large group today, then just send me a note in chat and we'll be sure to get that to you. Now we'll turn the program over to Cedric O'Connor.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine, and hello to everybody and welcome to today's very special presentation. I just want to begin by acknowledging the terrific work that Chef Emily and Catherine not only have done to prepare for today, but every week, every month, the Teaching Kitchen is busy connecting healthy food and different customs and traditions that are important to all of us in our community, really connecting that back to our broader community. And I just want to say the work that you're doing is wonderful, and it's an honor for me to be here today. And I have to start by just saying to everybody, I'm not an Irish expert, but I am an incredibly proud Irish American. And it was so exciting preparing for this because I got to really dust off my understanding or what I remember about St. Patrick's Day. And I think it's very important for me to kind of start from where does the St. Patrick's Day tradition begin? Because it has changed so much over the years. And we have some very special connections to St. Patrick's Day and the St. Patrick's Day Parade in New York, right here in Peekskill, and I'll share that with you in just a little bit. Some of you may know it already. I know that the real reason that we're all here is to see Chef Emily in action, and she has 3 recipes that she's going to be sharing with us, and whether it's a new way to prepare a dish that we're all familiar with, or whether it's just a way to watch a pro in action, I know we're all very much looking forward to Chef Emily in 10 or 15 minutes. But I wanted to start with St. Patrick's Day. Many of us probably know that St. Patrick is the patron saint of Ireland. And St. Patrick's Day started as a religious recognition of the arrival of Christianity in Ireland in the 5th century. Now, I was just a little kid back then, so I didn't remember a lot of that unless I went back to the internet to do some research. But it really was intended to be a religious observation. It was a solemn religious event, and for many centuries it was not something that was really widely celebrated outside of Ireland for obvious reasons. The Irish in Ireland were celebrating it where they lived. But through the centuries, as the Irish began immigrating in the 16th and 1700s to North America, they began bringing their love of their Irish tradition to North America with them. And one interesting thing that I found, I haven't been able to verify this, but it's on the internet, so it must be true. The very first St. Patrick's Day parade was in 1601 in St. Augustine, Florida, with some missionaries who were there, and they happened to have an Irish Catholic priest. So I thought that was pretty neat to think that even centuries before we were known as a nation, St. Patrick's Day was being celebrated in some form. And the St. Patrick's Day that we know more commonly in the United States today, the parade actually has been around since the 1760s. So a decade before we were, a declared nation, St. Patrick's Day, the parade was being celebrated in New York City. And I thought that was pretty neat to think that that tradition's been over 250 years. And for anybody that watches the St. Patrick's Day parade or has ever had a chance to go to the parade, they know it's a very exciting event. It's very festive. The very lead bagpiper is from Peekskill and has been for a number of years. Joe Brady is somebody that has been the very lead bagpiper for decades. And he's someone that is obviously very proud of his Hudson Valley heritage and his Peekskill heritage, but he is really the lead person on the parade. And I think that that's something that we should all be very proud of. I know many of you probably know Joe, but that's a neat connection to us. March is Irish American Heritage Month. It's a great time for us to connect to the 36 million individuals in America, citizens that have Irish American or Irish ancestry. And I also think it's pretty cool to think about Ireland as a country, only 4.9 million people today, but there are 55 million Irish descendants around the world and 36 million of them here in the United States.
Together, we're going to get
It's a very proud tradition that we have.
And more hopeful future. So there's real reason for.
If I could just gently ask everyone to, that would be terrific. So some of the things that I like to share about my Irish tradition. I grew up in a very rural part of New York State on a farm in an Irish American traditional Catholic family. And when I trace my roots back, and my mother's actually done a lot of the family history, where we live is only 2 miles from the Canadian border. And it's very close to where my great-grandfather, Jeremiah O'Connor, first settled in the 1880s. And he came from the west coast of Ireland, County Kerry, as he was leaving. Ireland at that time was a very turbulent time. It was a very turbulent era for a lot of people. And he left, like more than 1 million others left, to find the promise of freedom, religious freedom, political freedom, and the opportunity to make a living. And as he came to America, he didn't come the traditional route through New York City or Ellis Island. He actually came through Quebec. And we don't have any written records of this, but if you look at a map, you can see that the first sort of settlement that he came to in New York is where he settled down. And 5 generations later, my family are still there. Not the same family farm, but the same community. And so that's a great connection, not only to Ireland, but through my great-grandfather, Jeremiah. A lot of the foods that we know in the United States now, the Irish foods, probably the most famous one is corned beef and cabbage. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I even knew that this is not a traditional Irish food. If you ever visit Ireland, unless they're catering to a lot of us, the American tourists, this is not a traditional food. And there are a number of reasons for that, but beef was historically not something that there was a lot of in Ireland, a lot more pork, a lot more pigs, a lot more sheep, and certainly a lot of seafood. But the traditional meal that we think of is more of an Irish American meal. And it's been around for about 150 years. And it's really something that the Irish immigrants to New York City, living in close proximity in the tenements in New York City, living very close to their Jewish neighbors, they borrowed that recipe from their Jewish neighbors. And it really is, it's brisket. And it was plentiful in New York City, going to a kosher butcher. And that has become the traditional Irish American St. Patrick's Day meal. But it really has no beginnings in Ireland. A lot of the foods that I like, and I think that were a part of my family's history growing up, are the comfort foods. Like shepherd's pie is one that we love. It's something that's I think it's easy to make, and it's also something that, depending on how you make it, some people refer to it as shepherd's pie if it's made with lamb. Some people refer to it as cottage pie if it's made with beef. I tend to use the term interchangeably, but that is one of my favorite foods. And I know that Catherine and Chef Emily have asked me to share, some of the traditions and things that I have done to celebrate St. Patrick's Day throughout the years. And it certainly has changed throughout the decades. Being a youngster growing up near the Canadian border, there's an incredibly rich Irish-Canadian history. And it was very common for my family and I to go to Quebec, to Irish festivals, music festivals, to see Irish step dancing, traditional Irish music, and to really just partake in a lot of very Irish-centered activities. As I grew up and I moved to New York City in my 20s, certainly there's an Irish pub on many corners, and there are different ways to experience and celebrate St. Patrick's Day. And I loved the pub experience for many years because of the Irish music that you could find there. And you could find everything from Irish rock music to traditional Irish music, to a bagpiper or someone playing the fiddle and a tin whistle. And that was a very important part of my 20s. And now I think about different things, ways to celebrate. The Irish Hunger Museum that's in Battery Park City in New York City is a place that I've visited many times, and I recommend it to anyone that hasn't been there. It's easy to get to on 9A, just stay on the west side and go all the way down.
There's not even Zoom yet.
And I think that there are a number of things.
Yeah, I've never had Zoom, and I've seen all these.
You know what? I'm very sorry. This is
Sorry.
Catherine. Hello, everyone. This is Catherine. Cedric, sorry to interrupt. For some reason, Zoom settings have changed, and I can't mute you all directly myself. So kindly take a moment to look at your microphone icon, and please stay muted throughout the presentations. We're hearing a few conversations, so we really appreciate your help. Thank you.
And I do love hearing from everybody. It's great to hear your voices. I know that we are in a new Zoom world, so I'm often the person that's being reminded to be on Zoom. So I've been in your shoes many times. But New York City is also a terrific place to see live Irish music. I love Irish rock bands. We've probably all heard of U2 or other more traditional bands. But I think those are just some of the things that I have done living in and around New York. Here in Peekskill, we also have a very rich Irish tradition. The Paramount Theater is a wonderful place. The last year has been a little challenging due to COVID, but it was a wonderful place around the St. Patrick's Day season to see, Andy Cooney or Phil Coulter or any number of Irish musical acts. And I do look forward to the days when we have a lot more live music locally here in our own backyard. So with that, Chef Emily, I want to turn it over to you to see if you have any questions, or Catherine, if there are any questions in chat, or if there's anything anyone else would like to contribute before we really get into the cooking demonstration that Chef Emily is going to provide for us.
Well, I'll just jump in to say thank you so much, Cedric, for sharing your story, your heritage, and how you celebrate, and the history of St. Patrick's Day. I can't believe you fit that all into 15 minutes. I'm very impressed. So thank you. I'm just going to spotlight myself, and then Catherine, if you'd like, we can take questions from the audience. Does anyone have any questions?
Cedric and Chef Emily, no questions yet, but I will bring them up as they come in.
All right, fantastic. So welcome everybody to our teaching kitchen, and today we are celebrating traditional foods of Ireland, and we're not going to be making the corned beef like Cedric mentioned. We're going to be making more traditional foods. So like the rest of UK and Europe and in the cities, Ireland really has a thriving food culture. Chefs have embraced their heritage of their food and often work with familiar recipes and kind of create new ways to make them. And then outside of the cities, predominantly Irish food remains very traditional, beautiful, hearty fare like the shepherd's pie, Cedric, that you mentioned, recipes that are handed down over generations. So it has a really beautiful, rich food culture, and I'm excited to share that with you today. So we're going to be making 3 recipes in 30 minutes. I think we can do it. I believe in us. So we're going to be start off with the Celeriac soup. So if you're not familiar with celeriac, this is what it looks like. So it's also known as celery roots. And this is going to be blended with some potato, some shallot, some garlic. We're going to be cooking with a little bit of butter and white wine. It's going to be very flavorful, delicious. And our second recipe is potato cole cannon. So if you've heard of cole cannon before, or if you haven't, it emerged as a staple food by the mid 18th century, and it's a traditional food actually for Halloween. So this dish was used for fortune telling. So kind of a fun fact about cole cannon, a little trinket would be cooked into the dish. And if you found the trinket, depending on what it was, it meant something different. So if you found a little coin, that would mean that you would have, wealth for the upcoming year. Or a little rag, like a little piece of cloth, meant that poverty was in your future. So it was kind of like a fortune telling dish. We're not going to cook it with any trinkets inside because those are also choking hazards. So we don't want to include that, but it is a really delicious dish. So I'm excited to share that with you. And then the third recipe we're making is a strawberry fool. That's Foole, although sometimes it's spelled without the E. A fool is a dessert made by blending cooked sweetened fruits with whipped cream or custard, and it can be traced back to the 17th century, though the exact origin of this dish is lost to time. It's traditionally made with rhubarb or gooseberries, but we're going to be using strawberries today, which is a nice springy food as well. So let's begin. We're going to start by taking apart our celeriac, or also known as celery root, and you really want to peel off that tough outer layer, right? So making sure you get all of the skin off of this. It does tend to harbor dirt in the cracks. So just make sure you give it a good wash, peel it really well. And we're going to chop this up pretty small and add it to our pot. So one thing that I did ahead of time is I just heated up our chicken stock so that it would be nice and hot when we add it into the soup. And this is just a step that I do in order to expedite the cooking of this dish, because of course our time is limited today. So that's, you don't have to do that step if you don't want to, but just letting you know so you don't miss a single beat. And I am just noticing a little bit of feedback, so just take another moment to check your microphones and make sure you're muted. And thank you again for your cooperation on that. So here it is.
That's Emily.
Peeled and cleaned. Yes, Catherine.
May I just add a wonderful comment from Patricia? She said, based on your comments at the start of the recipe, a ring in the cole cannon meant you would be married within the year.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Thank you so much, Patricia, for contributing that. So a ring within your cole cannon. Wow, that would be a trinket I would like to find. All right. So I'm just chopping up the celery root nice and thin so it's going to cook faster. And then similarly, we're going to peel and chop up our potato. So I'm using Yukon potatoes today, and potatoes obviously have quite the history in Ireland. So we are just going to start by peeling it and chopping it into smaller pieces. All right.
I think so.
I think we're having some trouble with muting today, so apologies for any background noise, and just a reminder to keep yourselves muted. All right, so I just dropped a little knob of butter in there, and we're just going to pop in our shallots. So we're going to just start by heating this up. You want to get it nice and melted, and then while I'm waiting for my butter to melt, cut up my potato. So potatoes, we don't think of them as particularly nutritive. They're primarily a starchy carbohydrate, but they do contain some fiber, which I feel good about. And they also contain potassium. We don't usually think about potatoes as being high in potassium, but they do contain a good amount of potassium as well. And then here's our shallot. If you don't have shallots, you could use onions as well. Either white onions or red onions might create too much of a deep color in this. So stick to a white onion or a shallot. So I'm just going to start by taking off the top and the bottom, and then we'll slice right through to peel off the exterior, the papery skin, because you don't want that in our soup. Right, so just get this nice and cleaned off. And then we're just going to slice this, tucking your fingers, right? Always keep in mind, whenever you're holding something, when you're cutting, you really want to tuck your fingers. And it just takes practice to get used to that hand posture, because we grow up kind of holding our things out here, but we really want to practice that to keep your fingers safe. So our butter is really melted. Smells really good. You could also use olive oil for this recipe instead. Not a whole lot of olive trees in Ireland, probably not a single one. So butter is definitely the more traditional way to cook this dish because that is the kind of fat that was around, right? And as Cedric mentioned, not a ton of cows back in the day, but there was a little bit of butter from those cows. All right. So we're just starting off getting a little heat on these shallots. Wilt them down a little bit. And then I have some garlic cloves here. There's a little bit of a glare today. Such a nice sunny day. Not going to complain. So we've got our garlic. Again, removing that papery exterior, using the heel of your hand, pressing against your knife. You can use your body weight to kind of press down, or you can grab a can or something with a flat bottom and just give it a little smash. That way the skin pops right off. So same thing as with the shallots. We don't want the papery exterior. And I like to cut off the little nub on the bottom there just to make sure it's nice and cleaned off. So with our garlic, we're just going to go for a rough chop here. It doesn't have to be too exact for this because everything gets blended. So that's really nice and easy. So in goes the garlic. Our shallots are in. Let's add our celery root and our potato. And we're going to be using some white wine in this dish, which gives it a nice little bit of like an acidic backdrop. It's really good in this soup. So we have a little pinch of nutmeg, freshly grated nutmeg going in here too. And as you can tell, I do what's called mise en place. So I measure out my ingredients so it's nice and easy for me to just pop it all into the pot. Catherine, do we have any questions from anybody so far?
Chef Emily, we do. And first, a thank you to Cedric for invoking leprechauns because we think some leprechauns are playing with our audio today, as he said. So that's just
I think you're right. It's probably because I forgot my green.
Now, Chef Emily, the question is from Tonya. Obviously, this dish is not being made with meat, but as it becomes more current, can you make it with meat? And if so, what kind?
So this is the first dish that we're making right now is the Celeriac Soup. So this is a soup, it's not a meat dish. Perhaps you're referring to the second recipe, which is the potato colcannon. And for that recipe, we will be using some turkey bacon.
Very good.
All right. So I just added in the wine. It's kind of reduced by half. So this is what it looks like in here. And let's top our heated chicken broth. You can use vegetable broth if you want to make this fully vegetarian. Feel free to do so. So we're going to add some chicken broth, just enough to kind of cover the vegetables. And then I'm just going to pop this to the back, let it come to a boil. Okay. And then once it's boiling, turn it down and simmer it. So I also added, as we were chatting, a little pinch of salt. So you can feel free to do so. Keep in mind also that many chicken broths are in fact, they in fact contain a lot of salt already. So you may just want to keep that in mind that you may not need the salt because chicken broth can be so salty. So I often recommend people, it sounds a little bit strange, but taste your ingredients. Taste your vegetable broth, your chicken broth, whatever you're working with, a little bit on a spoon and try it. If it's very salty, you'll know not to add any salt to your dish. And if it's not salty, you'll know how much to add. So it's always good to know what your base ingredients are.
Steph,
all right.
Another question?
Yes.
Let's see. Robin is asking us, what does celeriac taste like? Is it very celery-like?
Great question, Robin. So I love celeriac. It's related to parsley and parsnips. And of course, celery, grows from it. It's the root of the celery. So it does have it's kind of like if you cross celery with a parsnip, it kind of has that flavor, like a little bit starchy, just a little bit of celery, but it's not really a strong celery flavor. It's rather subtle. which I really enjoy.
Okay, those are the questions for now. Thank you.
Great. And celery root is also packed with vitamins. It contains vitamin B6, which is unusual to find in vegetables, and also vitamin K, as well as some antioxidants and minerals, such as potassium. I guess there's a theme here today with our potassium. So I'm going to begin our second dish, which is the cabbage dish, the cold cannon. And actually, before I do that, let me do the fool first, because we have to cool our strawberries before we mix them with the cream, and I want to give them time to break down. So we're going to just backtrack a second here. And for this recipe, this is the dessert. I have some chopped strawberries. So I just did that by taking off the top, taking off and cutting it into quarters. Right? So just taking off the little green part. All right, so these are our chopped strawberries. We're going to dump them right into this pot. Nothing is in the pot, and the heat is going to help to break down the strawberries. I have a little bit of lemon juice and lemon zest. We're going to pop that in there as well. And then finally, this is going to get sweetened with honey. So I have about 1/3 of a cup of honey for 3 cups of strawberries, and we're just going to let that kind of mix together and cook down a little bit. This was a very ambitious menu for us today. We had a lot. I had a lot I wanted to cover. I wanted to include a dessert, a main dish, a soup. So it's going to be good though.
And
All right.
Cedric, how does all this look to you? Any comments?
I think it looks amazing, and I actually wish that I might just go to the kitchen right now.
Yeah, please do. You're welcome to join us, and we can also send you a little package of takeout for you as our honorary guest today.
You can fit all of this into 30 minutes, and I think a lot of your guests watching this, I could barely make toast in 30 minutes, so this is very important.
Thank you, Cedric. Thanks so much. So as you can see, the soup pot has come to a boil, so I'm just going to drop that down and let that simmer. And then in this pan, we're going to begin our cold cannon recipe. So pay attention here. We're going to add the cabbage to our pan that has some simmering water. And this is nice because it's sort of like a one-pan dish. You can just throw your cabbage in, about 3 cups of that. And there's water in that pan, I don't know if you guys can see it. And we're going to cover that and just let it simmer and soften. So that's the first step, is really letting the cabbage, cook. And then we're going to add it back into the pan again. So just a brief note on cabbage, this wonderful, beautiful food. I don't know if you can see there on the inside how pretty that is. I love red cabbage because it's like a beautiful marbled effect. So cabbage, anti-inflammatory compounds, antioxidant rich, high in fiber, and it also contains vitamins C, K, and B6, as well as minerals such as iron, calcium, and magnesium. So really powerful food here. And I just start by cutting it in half, and then I cut it into quarters, and I wedge out the core here. So I just go at it at an angle, kind of wedge out the core, and then slice across, again, making a nice claw with your hand. All right, so that's how I prepared the cabbage that went into the pan. So as things are sitting up here and simmering and we're waiting for our next steps, Cedric, did you have anything you wanted to share about your trip to Ireland with us today?
I think I waited far too long for my first trip, and I didn't go to Ireland until 4 years ago for the first time. And I think that I can't wait to get back, and I've gone, once since. So my family and I were there. I think it's absolutely a beautiful country. It's so easy to get to. If you haven't gone, there's no need to wait. It's so easy to get to. It's the equivalent of flying to California, from New York, flying 6 hours. It's very easy to get to, and I could not believe just how beautiful, the countryside, was, and how beautiful the people were. And my backdrop, for those that can see it, is one of the areas that we visited. This is on the west coast of Ireland. This is the Cliffs of Moher, and it didn't look like this the day that I was there. It was very windy and rainy, which can happen even in the nicest of weather in summer. But just an amazing culture, an amazing country. And I think that, the music is one of the things that really resonates with me, the traditional Irish music that you can hear almost anywhere. And I found that the smaller the town that you could get to, I almost found that it was the better of the experience that you had, or the better the music. And the deeper you could get into Ireland, the more you could really immerse yourself in the culture. So I guess my plug is, if you haven't gone to Ireland, once we have COVID behind us, strongly consider going. Bring lots of friends and family with you. On my first visit, I went with my mom and dad and my in-laws, along with my son, who was 10 at the time, and my wife. So it was a really fun multi-generational trip, and fun for everybody.
Thank you for sharing. That really sounds like a special trip for you and your family. So I just spotlighted you so everybody could see the beautiful cliffs behind you. They look amazing. Definitely makes me want to go. All right, and now I will go. All right, so oh yes, Catherine.
Yes, Chef Emily, 2 questions. One came via email from Elaine. What is the nutritional value of cabbage?
So Elaine, yeah, great question. And I just briefly touched upon it. It's anti-inflammatory, antioxidant rich, and contains vitamins C, K, and B6. It's also very low calorie. It contains some minerals as well, iron, calcium, and magnesium. Not to mention it's very high in fiber, so really good for our digestive health as well.
And quickly, the second question is from Barry concerning the previous recipe. How important is it to use heavy cream? Can you substitute it with a low-fat version?
So Barry, that's a good question. We're using the heavy cream to actually make our own whipped cream. So it wouldn't work to try to, unfortunately, it wouldn't work to try to lighten that up. You could try to make whipped cream from coconut milk if you wanted it to be dairy-free. That involves another class for another time. But definitely you could use coconut milk, but you need the fat in there is the short answer. Sorry to say. All right, and any more questions, Catherine? And then I'll jump to our next part of our recipe here.
No questions, but just to share another comment, our community of attendees are always so positive and appreciative. And Pamela is sharing how when she goes to a St. Patrick's dinner, she's bringing this booklet with her.
Aw, thank you so much. That really means a lot. Thanks. Well, we put a lot of, work and passion into our classes here. So thank you for noticing. All right, we're just boiled these potatoes, and they were sliced in half, and you just want to boil them until you can kind of go through them easily with a knife, right? So these are ready, and this is for the cold cannon recipe. So I'm just going to drain the water off. Then we're going to put it back into the pot without the water. Okay. And we're going to smash them using our potato masher, which is over here. So you just want to work those down, right, and kind of give them a good smash. We can add some butter and some salt and pepper. And then we're going to use these potatoes in that cold cannon dish and just kind of fold in the cabbage and the bacon. It's going to be really, really flavorful, and it's quite a simple dish. Lovely served with a poached egg on top. So you can sort of see how this nice rough mashed texture. All right, so let's keep that warm as we get ready with the remaining ingredients for this dish. Okay. So our cabbage is done. Just show you this. How do you know it's done? It's nice, it's wilted, it's soft, so we can drain that. I have a colander set here in the sink next to me that is off camera, so do not fret. I'm not pouring this cabbage down the sink. It's going into our colander here. All right, I'm just gonna scoop off any other cabbage bits because we're gonna cook our bacon in this pan, and I don't want to have any burned cabbage kind of stuck to the bottom here. So I have this pan over a medium-high heat. Okay, well, that was medium. Now it's medium high. And we're just gonna add a little drizzle of oil to our pan. Every time I smile, my headphone pops out a little bit. I have to be more serious in my classes. All right, we're gonna add a little bit of oil and just get this bacon going. So the bacon that we're using today is the uncured turkey bacon. Certainly you can use regular bacon if that is your preference, but as many of you may know, we try to make things a little bit healthier here in the teaching kitchen to support your bodies. So little turkey bacon, and I just cut it up into smaller pieces so it will kind of integrate into the dish a bit better. So I took these long strips and I just cut them up. Any questions, Catherine? How's our audience doing?
Yes, there are 2 questions, and I do need your help with the pronunciation since I know you're an expert.
Boy.
Ayurvedic, is that how you say it?
Correct.
Diane is raising the fact that an Ayurvedic diet says you should not heat honey. What's your feeling?
So thank you for raising that question. And you're correct that in Ayurveda, which is Ayurveda is the sister science of yoga. It's the traditional Indian medicine, school of medicine, and originating in India. And it is, you are correct that in Ayurveda, they don't suggest heating honey because it destroys the properties of the honey. So if you wanted to this recipe, you could use maple syrup instead, which is acceptable to be heated, if that is the diet that you're following. If not, the more traditional version of this recipe is to heat the honey, so that's the way we're making it today. But there are alternatives you could do.
And Chef Emily, our friend E, who always asks such good questions, she's asking, is cabbage liquid good for a soup?
Yeah, absolutely. If you wanted to, you have to like the flavor of cabbage. If you don't like the flavor of cabbage, I wouldn't recommend saving it. But yeah, you could definitely drain the cabbage water off and throw it into your soup. Why not? That's a great idea. Any other questions?
Chef Emily, that's it for now.
All right, great. Well, let's check on our fruit since it's been simmering nicely back here. Okay, so this is perfect. It's cooked down, nice and soft, and it released a lot of liquid, right? Because when you add heat to strawberries, that's kind of what they do. They get super soupy. So that's normal. We're gonna let this cool down so that we can then fold in the cream. All right, hopefully it'll cool in 5 minutes. So meanwhile, we have our bacon simmering. We're gonna throw in our scallions. So we're also known as green onions. And this is gonna add a really nice flavor to this dish. Absolutely love green onions. A lot of people that can't have onions can somehow still have green onions. So if you're one of those people, you might wanna give it a try. Speak to your doctor and give it a try. All right, we're gonna put this in the cup with the water and they will grow back. So come on back next week to see how our little scallions have grown. So this is looking really good here. It's starting to caramelize, get some nice flavor. So I'm gonna add the spring onions in. Let's add our cabbage as well, our cooked cabbage. We kind of mix all that up. And then the way I wrote the recipe, I intended to put the cabbage in with the potatoes, but I think because this is a nice wide pan and it's a little bit easier to work with, we're gonna do it the other way around and just mix the potatoes in with the cabbage. All right. All right, beautiful. Any other questions?
Chef Emily, a question from Valerie. Can you add the honey to strawberries once they have cooled down?
That's a good question, Valerie. I think, I suppose you could. the honey sort of helps to cook the strawberries down and sweeten them as they're cooking. It just integrates a little bit better in the dish. But I suppose you could try if you're looking for a solution for our Ayurvedic friends. Yeah, I would say that's an interesting idea. Let me know how it goes.
Chef
All right.
Emily, that's it for now.
Great, thank you, Catherine. So we can add, so let's show you the final results here. We've got our cabbage, our bacon, our green onions over some heat. We're gonna add our potatoes in and kind of mix that all up. This is really like a one-pot dish because it's got, you know, your vegetables, your starchy carbohydrates. We're gonna add an egg on top. So it really is a nice complete meal. All right. So this dish is done. And I'll plate it for you and show you exactly what it looks like. I want to just turn my attention to the soup quickly because I have left it back here for a little while. So look how yummy this looks. You've also got your protein in there from the turkey bacon, right? We need smell-o-vision. I think that's the future of Zoom. Okay. Check on our soup. So for this soup, you just want to make sure that the hardest things in there have cooked and softened a little bit. So we're going to check and see, are our potatoes soft? Is the celery root soft? You can kind of pinch one out and see how it looks. Looks pretty nice. Yeah, this is nicely softened. So we're going to toss this into the blender with a little bit of milk. We're going to use some whole milk for this. You could also use non-dairy milk if you prefer to make it, you know, a non-dairy version. So just keep in mind that the blender that I have here today, this is a heat-proof blender. So I can blend hot things in this blender and it'll be fine. If you have a blender at home, because it has these little steam vents, I don't know if you can see those, right? If you have a blender at home that is not heat-proof, you want to be really careful blending soups. You want to make sure you let the soup cool down a little bit until it's, you know, a comfortable temperature where it's not going to burn you. And then at that point, you can blend it. So just keep that in mind. All right, so I'm going to give this a whirl. And I know we're coming up fast on our time. I feel like I'm on like a Top Chef like TV show today.
It's very impressive, Chef. Very impressive.
I apologize for the noise. And I'll draw this forward just a little bit so you can see better. I'm now going to add the milk to this and just give it one more blend. Let everything kind of blend together. Okay, all done. So as we're closing up here and plating our items, Cedric, I did a little looking into the color green and why all the green on St. Patrick's Day. Is this something that you happened to see in your research? And if not, I certainly have some information I can share.
Sure. I've always been led to believe that because of the, I think, hundreds of shades of green in Ireland, or the countless shades of green of the fields and the clovers and everything else, that's why it was such an important part of Ireland. Yeah,
so that's pretty much exactly what I found as I was researching this, that Ireland is sometimes called the Emerald Isle because of all these shades of green. But one thing that I found out, which was really interesting, was the color that people originally associated with St. Patrick was actually blue. So some of the ancient Irish flags actually have the color blue on them and not green. So green was finally introduced to St. Patrick's Day festivities in the 18th century when the shamrock which we all know that the clover, which is of course green, became a national symbol. So because of the shamrock's popularity and Ireland's beautiful green, lush landscapes, that's how the color kind of stuck to the holiday. I thought that was really interesting. I didn't know that before.
That really is, and I didn't know about the original connection to blue being associated with St. Patrick's Day in Ireland. That's really cool.
Yeah, fun. So here's our cold cannon recipe. Here is our soup. And this is to be served with a poached egg on top. So I did poach some eggs ahead of time just to have them ready for our class because I knew we had a lot to do. And then you can just kind of, saw the egg open and use the yolk kind of as like a sauce for your dish. So those are our 2 recipes. And then I'm just going to check on the dessert. And I know it's 12:45, so it is soon time to end. So the strawberries are still quite warm. So we didn't quite make our time cutoff today. Here's our whipped heavy cream. And what you're going to do in order to make this dessert, I'm not going to do it here because it'll melt my cream, is that once the strawberries are completely cool, what I would do is I would then fold it gently into the cream and put that in the refrigerator for an hour. And that is how you make a fool. It's very, very simple. Even a fool could do it. I couldn't resist. And that is our dessert recipe for today. So do we have any closing statements or anything you'd like to share, Cedric, before we wrap up our class today?
Just wanting to say thank you to you and everybody for being here. And whether you're Irish or Irish in spirit, happy St. Patrick's Day and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you so much, Cedric. And thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing all your stories. I loved hearing and learning from you. So thank you for being a part of this program. And to the rest of our community, wishing you a very happy St. Patrick's Day. I hope the day will bring you luck and joy. And of course, come on back to our teaching kitchen for more classes in the future. So thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.